Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring Angela Duckworth's Grit, the power of passion and perseverance.
Oh, this is a good one.
This book, it's gotten some serious attention, you know? It has endorsements from, high achievers like Ed Viesturs.
Oh, wow.
You know, the guy who climbed Mount Everest 7 times.
Yeah.
And Ariana Huffington.
Okay, yeah. So we're talking about some pretty impressive endorsements here.
Right.
What is it about this book that sets it apart?
Well, I think Duckworth's own journey kind of adds another layer to it, right? Like, she was told she wasn't a genius growing up.
Oh, wow.
But then she went on to win MacArthur Genius Grant.
Okay, so, proving everyone wrong. That's going to feel pretty good. But it makes you wonder what her definition of genius is then.
Right. And that's kind of what we're diving into today. What is this whole grit thing? And how does it actually connect to, achieving those big long-term goals?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we even begin to unpack this concept of grit?
Well, Duckworth starts the book off with this example from West Point Military Academy.
Okay, makes sense. Pretty intense environment. I imagine they've got to have a pretty high success rate with their selection process, right? Like they weed out the people who aren't going to make it.
You'd think so, right? You'd assume only the most dedicated and resilient individuals would make it through that program.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, it's not the case. Actually, about 1 out of every 5 cadets ends up dropping out.
Really?
And a big chunk of those dropouts, they happen during that first summer. There's this grueling 7-week training program they call Beast Barracks.
Beast Barracks, that sounds intense.
It is. And it turns out that their existing, selection methods, the ones that focus on things like academic scores and leadership potential and physical fitness.
Right, those traditional measures.
Right, they weren't very good at predicting who would actually persevere.
So there's something more to it than just those traditional metrics, right?
Exactly. And that's where Duckworth's research comes in. She developed this thing called the grit scale to measure a cadet's level of grit.
Okay, so what does this grit scale actually measure?
So it kind of goes beyond those conventional things, and it assesses, this combination of passion and perseverance.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not just about having the raw talent or potential, but about possessing that tenacity to push through challenges and stay committed to the goal.
Exactly. And guess what? The grit scale ended up being way more accurate at predicting which cadets would actually stick it out.
So already we see a shift in thinking here, right? It's not just about those inherent abilities, but about having the grit to navigate challenges and stay committed to the goals.
Absolutely. And this research, it was like a turning point for Duckworth. It really made her question this whole idea about the role of effort and achievement. Is it really all about talent, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, is this pattern of grit being a stronger predictor of success? Something that she found in other areas beyond just West Point?
She did. She ended up interviewing this wide range of successful people, like CEOs, artists, athletes, scientists, all
It's a
sorts.
diverse group.
And a recurring theme emerged. These individuals weren't just, lucky or naturally gifted. They were all incredibly dedicated. They consistently pushed themselves to get better, and most importantly, they persevered, even when they faced setbacks and failures.
I can definitely see that. It seems like resilience and perseverance are essential ingredients for achieving remarkable things, regardless of the specific field.
Totally. And to kind of illustrate this point, Duckworth shares this story about a former student of hers named David. He scored pretty low on aptitude tests and was basically deemed not ready for advanced math.
Ouch, that's got to sting a bit.
But he had this incredible determination and a willingness to work hard.
So did he end up succeeding?
He did. He excelled in his calculus classes by his senior year and even achieved a perfect score on the AP exam.
Wow, that's really impressive. So a classic case of someone proving those initial assessments wrong through sheer grit and determination?
Yeah, and this example just shows you that sometimes a less talented but grittier person can actually achieve more over time.
It really challenges those traditional views of success, doesn't it? And that's not all she talks about, right? Doesn't she have a way of kind of quantifying this relationship between talent, effort, and achievement?
She does. She uses these 2 equations. Talent x effort equals skill, and skill x effort equals achievement.
Okay, I'm interested to hear how those equations work.
So the first one, talent x effort equals skill, shows that talent is important, but it needs effort to turn into an actual skill. It's like raw potential needs practice and perseverance to really develop.
So even someone with less innate talent can still attain a high level of skill if they're putting in the effort.
Exactly. Now, the second equation, skill x effort, achievement, it builds on that idea. Even if two people have the same skill, the one who puts in more effort is going to achieve more. It's like effort is a multiplier.
So it's not just about the starting point, but about how much effort you put in to develop those skills and translate them into something tangible.
Exactly. And Duckworth uses these really captivating examples of grit in action from different fields. Like, think about Warren McKenzie, this potter who spent his whole life perfecting his craft.
Okay, yeah, I know his work. Incredible dedication.
He believed that even with tons of talent, you still need continuous learning and a drive to improve to really master something.
It's that growth mindset, right? Always striving to get better.
Yes. And then there's John Irving, the novelist. He struggled a lot as a young writer.
Oh, really?
He even had to repeat a year of high school.
Wow, that's surprising to hear.
But his dedication to writing was amazing. He constantly rewrote his novels, always aiming to improve with each draft. And that perseverance paid off. He won a National Book Award.
So inspiring. Even those who don't initially excel can reach incredible heights through sheer grit and determination.
Exactly.
So we've seen how grit plays out in demanding places like West Point and in pursuit of specific goals like mastering a craft. But are there any studies that actually look at the impact of grit on like overall life outcomes?
There are. One that Duckworth talks about is the Harvard treadmill test.
A treadmill test. That sounds interesting. What were they testing for? Just how long people could run?
It wasn't just about physical fitness. They were looking at stamina and willpower, like the ability to push through discomfort and keep going even when you're exhausted.
Okay, so more of a mental toughness thing. Did it actually tell them anything useful?
It did. Decades later, researchers followed up with the people who took the test
No way.
and their scores on that treadmill test.
Yeah.
They actually predicted how successful and well-adjusted they were as adults.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It really highlights the connection between mental resilience, that ability to endure discomfort and stay committed, with long-term success and well-being.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that showing up consistently, putting in the effort, even when it's tough, that's what really matters.
It's about developing those grit muscles, building that capacity to face challenges head-on and stay dedicated to the journey.
Absolutely. And as we go further into Duckworth's book, we'll unpack these two key components of grit, passion, and perseverance in more detail.
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you for listening to Rambling Dan Rowe's Deep Dive Book Reviews. Please help support our channel by clicking the like and subscribe button. Thank you.
All right, so let's break down these two key parts of grit, passion, and perseverance.
Okay, so remember that grit scale we talked about earlier? Well, it's not just about measuring like your overall grittiness. It actually looks at these two specific components.
Okay, so passion and perseverance are kind of like the two sides of the grit coin.
Yeah, exactly. So passion in this context, it's about having a consistent interest in something over a long period. It's not like that initial excitement or a fleeting burst of enthusiasm. It's more about that deep-seated commitment that keeps you going even when things get tough, even when the newness wears off.
That makes sense. It's like you're truly dedicated to it, not just superficially attracted to the idea. So then how does perseverance fit into this?
Perseverance is all about how you handle setbacks. It's that bounce-back ability. You keep pushing forward even when things get tough, even when you fail. It's about not giving up on those long-term goals, no matter what obstacles get in your way.
So it's like that inner drive that keeps you going, that resilience that helps you navigate the inevitable challenges that are going to pop up along the way.
Exactly. And Duckworth, she uses this really great example of a guy named Jeffrey Gettleman. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who spent years covering East Africa for the New York Times.
Okay, so he's obviously achieved a high level of success in a really demanding field. What's his story? Was he always passionate about journalism?
Actually, no, it wasn't like a preordained calling or anything. His path was a bit different.
Really? I'm curious to hear how he ended up finding his passion then.
So it all started with a trip he took to East Africa. He just felt this deep connection to the people and the region, and that kind of sparked a curiosity in him to learn more.
That's cool. So it sounds like his passion didn't just appear overnight. It was sparked by this experience that really resonated with him on a deeper level.
Yeah, and after that trip, he started taking Swahili language courses, went back to the area, and eventually started writing for his student newspaper.
So a gradual process of deepening engagement with something that truly captivated his interest.
And his story actually highlights something that Duckworth talks about, this idea of goal hierarchies.
Goal hierarchies, what does that mean?
So Duckworth, she says that our goals are often interconnected and kind of organized in this pyramid structure. And sometimes to stay committed to those big long-term goals, You have to be willing to let go of some smaller goals that might be holding you back.
Ah, I see. So it's about recognizing when a particular path is no longer serving that ultimate objective and having the flexibility to adjust the approach.
Exactly. It's like, got to keep your eye on the bigger picture, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes letting go of those smaller goals can actually propel you further towards those ultimate aspirations.
That makes sense. Now, when we talk about grit, there's this whole nature versus nurture debate, right? Like, are we born with a certain amount of grit, or can we develop it over time? Where does Duckworth stand on this?
Duckworth acknowledges that genetics might have some influence. Some people might just naturally be predisposed to certain personality traits that are associated with grit.
Okay, so there might be a genetic component.
But she emphasizes that grit isn't fixed.
Hmm.
Our experiences, our environment, the choices we make, these can all really shape our levels of grit.
That's encouraging to hear. It means we're not just stuck with whatever level of grit we might have inherited. We have the power to actually cultivate it within ourselves.
Exactly. And she's observed that grit tends to increase with age.
That makes sense. As we get older, we go through more experiences, successes, failures, challenges. All that shapes our resilience and determination. It's like we're building those grit muscles through life's ups and downs.
Exactly. Those experiences, whether they're big or small, they contribute to our ability to navigate setbacks, to bounce back from those tough times, and to stay committed to our long-term goals, even when we face obstacles.
It highlights the importance of embracing those challenges as opportunities for growth, doesn't it? It's through those hurdles, pushing through that discomfort, that we really build that inner fortitude.
Absolutely. It's not about avoiding the challenges, but reframing them as like stepping stones on the path to growth and resilience.
So we've talked about how passion can develop gradually and the importance of aligning our goals. But what about discovering those passions in the first place? Is there like a magic formula for finding those deep-seated interests that can really fuel our grit?
Duckworth, she actually challenges that whole notion that we each have this like singular predefined passion just waiting to be discovered.
Interesting. So it's not always about having that like aha moment where everything suddenly clicks into place.
Right. Instead, she suggests that our interests often develop gradually through exploring and engaging more deeply with things that spark our curiosity.
So it's not about waiting for that passion to just magically reveal itself. It's about being proactive, seeking out new experiences, experimenting, and allowing those interests to kind of unfold naturally.
Exactly. It's about being curious and approaching life with this sense of exploration. She even talks about how boredom can actually be a valuable signal in this process.
Boredom. How does boredom factor into discovering our passions?
Well, Duckworth suggests that sometimes boredom can be a sign that we're craving new challenges, that our minds are looking for stimulation and engagement beyond what we're currently doing.
Ah, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It could actually be a call to action, a nudge to explore new territories and expand our horizons.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that restlessness and using it as a springboard to potentially uncover new passions.
Okay, so let's say we've done all that exploring and experimenting and we found something that really excites us. What's the next step? How do we take that spark of interest and transform it into something more sustainable, something that can really fuel those long-term goals?
That's where deliberate practice comes in. It's about taking that initial interest and really developing it through focused, intentional effort.
I've heard a lot about deliberate practice lately. It seems like it's often touted as this key factor in achieving mastery no matter what the field is. So what exactly does deliberate practice involve? How does it help us develop that grit?
Deliberate practice, it's not just about going through the motions or mindlessly repeating something. It's about pushing beyond your comfort zone, intentionally focusing on specific areas where you need to improve, and getting that immediate feedback to help you refine your technique.
So it's not about just putting in the hours, but about the quality of those hours,
Yeah.
right? Being strategic and intentional with our practice.
Exactly. It's about honing in on those weaknesses and turning them into strengths through focused effort and that continuous refinement.
So we're back diving deeper into Angela Duckworth's grit. Last time we were talking about that idea of deliberate practice, turning those sparks of interest into like real sustainable passions.
Yeah, in deliberate practice, it's kind of where things get real, when you're talking about cultivating grit and achieving mastery, like actually getting really good at something.
Right. It's going beyond just enjoying something, and really putting in that focused, intentional effort to improve.
Exactly. And Duckworth, she points out a few things, key components of deliberate practice. that make it super effective. So first, you got to set those stretch goals, right? Aims that are just a little bit beyond what you can currently do.
So you're not just staying in your comfort zone.
Right. It's about challenging yourself to keep growing and improving.
Got it. So what else is important in this process of deliberate practice?
Another big thing is that intense focus during those practice sessions. Minimizing distractions, putting the phone away, really giving your full attention to the skill you're working on.
Yeah, like really being present in the moment.
Absolutely. And then you've got to get feedback, and not just any feedback, but immediate and specific feedback that pinpoints exactly what you can improve.
Ah, I see. So you can zero in on those weaknesses and actually address them.
Right. And that's where having a coach or a mentor can be super helpful, right? Someone to give you that objective view of your performance and some tailored advice.
Yeah, like a mirror, reflecting back both the good and the bad.
And then finally, and this is a big one, you got to be willing to put in the work to actually refine those weaknesses.
I can see how that might be the toughest part for some people.
It's definitely not always easy, but it's in those areas where we struggle that we have the biggest opportunity for growth.
That makes sense. So it's about pushing through that discomfort to reach that next level.
Duckworth gives some great examples of deliberate practice in action. Like Benjamin Franklin, he had these crazy writing exercises where he would rewrite essays from authors he admired, like word for word, trying to get better at writing.
Wow, even someone like Benjamin Franklin saw the value of constantly trying to improve.
Totally. And she also talks about the training regimens of National Spelling Bee finalists.
Oh yeah, those kids are intense.
They spend hours each day just drilling word lists, studying the roots of words, perfecting their pronunciation. It's pretty amazing.
So whether you're trying to become a writer, a spelling bee champ, or anything else, those principles of deliberate practice really apply across the board.
Exactly. Setting those challenging goals, really focusing, getting feedback, and working on those weaknesses.
Embracing that process of continuous improvement. Mastery's a journey, not a destination, right?
Right. Now, Duckworth also talks about flow. That feeling of being totally absorbed in something you're doing, where time kind of disappears.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling. It's like being in the zone where everything just clicks.
But it's important to understand that she makes a distinction between flow and deliberate practice.
Okay, how so? They seem kind of similar.
Well, deliberate practice, it often involves pushing your limits and dealing with frustration, working on those things you weren't good at yet. Flow, on the other hand, usually happens when you're more in your comfort zone and your skills are kind of matching the challenge.
So they're both important, but they play different roles.
Exactly. Flow can be a sign you're on the right track, that you're getting better at something. But deliberate practice is what helps you break through those plateaus and keep improving.
So flow can be enjoyable, but deliberate practice is often where the real growth happens.
And Duckworth actually uses herself as an example.
Yeah.
She talks about how she used deliberate practice to get better at giving her TED Talk. She got feedback, rewrote it a bunch of times, practiced like crazy.
It makes you realize that even people who seem naturally talented often put in a ton of work behind the scenes.
Totally. It all comes back to grit, right? That passion and perseverance that fuels long-term success.
So we've talked about finding those passions, setting big goals, and that whole deliberate practice thing. But what's the underlying motivation behind all this? Why do we even bother pushing ourselves like that?
Duckworth says that having a sense of purpose is a big part of it. When we find something we're truly passionate about, something that aligns with our values, it helps us persevere.
Ah, so it's about finding that deeper meaning.
Exactly. She talks about this difference between being motivated by pleasure and being motivated by purpose. And she says purpose is way more powerful.
Like it comes from within, not just from external rewards.
Right. And along with purpose, there's another crucial element, hope. Maintaining a positive outlook, even when things get tough.
I can see how that would be important. It's easy to get discouraged when faced with challenges.
Yeah, and she talks about this thing called learned helplessness. It's this idea that if you fail enough times, you start to believe that your efforts don't matter, and you give up.
That's a dangerous mindset to fall into. So what's the antidote to that? How do you cultivate that sense of hope and belief in yourself?
Duckworth says having a growth mindset is key. It's about believing that you can always improve, that your abilities aren't fixed.
So instead of seeing failure as a sign of your limitations, you see it as an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. And along with that, optimism is really important too. Believing that things will work out, even if you're facing setbacks.
So it's like having faith in yourself and in the process.
And she shares stories about people who overcame incredible adversity. There's Scott Barry Kaufman, who had trouble with standardized tests when he was younger but ended up thriving. And Keyvan Asamani, a high-achieving student who faced some really difficult personal challenges but still managed to succeed.
Inspiring stories. It shows you that even when things are tough, you can still achieve amazing things with the right mindset.
Definitely. And in the last part of the book, Duckworth zooms out a bit and looks at how grit can be fostered not just within individuals, but within groups and teams too.
Okay, so taking it beyond the personal level.
Right. She talks about this concept called the co-responsive principle, this idea that our environment shapes who we are.
So if you're in an environment that values grit and perseverance, it can actually help you become grittier yourself.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where those qualities can thrive. And she gives examples of this in action. The Seattle Seahawks, under Pete Carroll, and the UNC Tar Heels soccer team, led by Anson Dorrance.
Those are two incredibly successful teams. What did they do to build that culture of grit?
Both of those coaches, they really focused on building a team culture that emphasized shared values, good communication, and constantly striving to get better.
So it's about creating that environment where everyone feels supported and motivated to push themselves.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into grit, I think there's a really important question for all of us to think about. How can we each bring more grit into our own lives? How can we figure out our passions, embrace challenges, and cultivate that determination to achieve our goals?
It's a question worth exploring, and honestly, I think everyone should check out Angela Duckworth's Grit. It's full of insights and strategies for developing those qualities in yourself.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of grit. We hope you found it helpful, and until next time, keep those grit muscles working.